Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with stalwarts of music. Today's episode is being partnered by Perpetual Buzz Experiences, which is an artist representation company with three very basic but lofty goals. They help funding social causes for a lot of artists from different parts of the world, and they make sure that people have a good time throughout the process. Be sure to check them out on www.perpetualbuzz.com. We have yet another partner, which is Wire Up Music Store, and they're one of the finest music retail stores based out of Bangalore with state of art equipment, possibly your one stop solution for musical gear ranging from guitars to ukulele to classical instruments and percussive instruments. Check them out on Instagram. They go by the handle at the rate wireup.india. Speaking of my guest today, she is a German born Spanish American singer songwriter. She's got a very playful but truly a passionate spirit in terms of her vocal abilities. She's got genuine songwriting skill sets. She's a 24-year-old songwriter who's represented herself in some of the biggest musical stages in US and other parts of the world. She's played at some big platforms like the Red Rocks Amphitheater, Apollo, Kennedy Center, and many more. She's done over 100 plus national shows and she's still counting. She's been quoted by Chris Martin of Coldplay for one of her recent songs as one of the best singer songwriters out there. And she interestingly released her all new EP, Elegy, yesterday. And she's all set to do her new international tour. So, without any further ado, I'm delighted to welcome my guest for today, Victoria Canal. Namaste, Victoria.
Namaste. How are you? Good to see you.
Very well. How are you? Which part of the world are you in right now?
Right now, I'm in London, and I'm just out. You're catching me in the middle of my shop for my tour, so I'm getting all my wardrobe today.
Oh, and, wow!
Yeah, I just stepped out from my shopping to speak with you guys.
I hope this is going to be worthwhile, and you might probably catch on a little bit of shopping after the interview.
Definitely worthwhile. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on your all-new EP, Elegy, that launched yesterday. So what do you have to say about this highlight in your career in terms of this new EP?
Well, it's definitely a big milestone for me. It's my first release on a major label. I've always been an indie baby. So it feels like a step forward in that respect. It's also the first project that I've mostly self-produced. And when the pandemic struck, I really sort of hunkered down and didn't delay my sort of production developing skills any longer. It's just so easy to defer to other people, particularly men in the industry, to just do that for you. And it's like far too common to let that happen. And I definitely had not pushed myself in that regard. So it felt really good to like take command as an engineer, producer. And yeah, it feels like a huge step forward creatively compared to my last project.
I'm really happy to have had the privilege to hear this entire album, and it sounds wonderful. You know, in terms of the artistic expression, I've seen a lot transcend from the musician you were over the years, right? From what you put out in 2020 to versus something in 2022, I see a lot of development there. So you've had a great start in terms of this entire pursuit. You're really young right now, and the pandemic has sort of helped you discover a lot in terms of your artistic abilities and a lot of self-exploration during that point of time. And as a matter of fact, you've been coached by Jan Smith, who happens to be one of the most reputed vocal coaches out there, who's trained people like Usher, Drake, Justin Bieber, etc. And your song has been quoted by Chris Martin, like I mentioned earlier, as one of the best songs ever written. You've had numerous accolades already. What prompted this young teenage girl to go and pursue her passion for music? And what was that impulse that drove you into this entire process?
I've just always loved music ever since I was a little kid. My grandma on my mom's side, she's from the States, from Georgia, and we would visit her in the summers. And she was a piano teacher, and she also led the choir at church. And I was never particularly religious growing up, but seeing the command that she would have over a room in church and seeing how music really connected people to something bigger than them felt so spiritual to me. And I just loved the connection from it. I think I've always just been so eager to connect with other people. And music is like one of the most universal ways to do that. So I think it was just an impulse. I can't really explain why, but it's probably thanks to my grandma, to be honest. Yeah.
Wonderful. So you've had a fair stint already in terms of music, and I'm sure there must have been a lot of ups and downs throughout this journey so far. Though early on you've already had like some amount of experience as to the same. If we were to talk about ups and downs in life, a lot of us would be comfortable sharing a lot of obstacles that have come down our way in terms of our journey as an artist. It could be more tempting to talk about, but let's set that aside. What are some of the most gratifying moments so far?
I'm happy to talk ups and downs whenever you like, because I feel like that's literally the life of
Okay.
any artist,
All right.
and person, actually.
Yeah.
But gratifying moments, I think getting to meet and sometimes work with or learn from my heroes and like people that I've been listening to my whole life that I grew up listening to. That's probably one of the most gratifying things about putting myself out there as an artist. You know, it's so easy to like make things and then not find the bravery or the will to put them out there. And I just think that the payoff is really, at least for me, those incredible mentors that become like teachers, not only musically but spiritually and like just out in life. Just surrounding yourself with people who teach you about yourself and about the world, the way to move through it. You know, I think that's a really incredible gift. And then as far as the downs go, I mean, yeah, it's an extremely volatile life even now. I think, it's one of those things where when you want something so bad, it just feels like it's really far away. And, am I capable? Do I have what it takes to get there? Maybe, maybe not, depending on the day. And then the irony is I've met enough people now to know that once you get there, that doesn't fill you up. And then you still have a lot of self-work to do. But you can't really shortcut learning the lessons that it takes about like what life is really about, and I toggle between satisfied with my life as is and desperate to achieve more every single day. It's I definitely like have uh, this deep contradiction in myself of elevated sense of like I'm something special and then like zero self-worth. And those just kind of live together all the time.
I really like the modesty, in terms of whatever you said. And from what I gauge, to, to to me, it seems like you have this incredible quality of flow and surrender, and harmonizing with that flow in terms of your day to day life. Have you ever doubted what you were doing in terms of music as to its value or meaning?
That's a really good question. um I don't think I've ever doubted my underlying purpose, but I've definitely doubted my own capabilities, if that makes sense. So like even if I'm sitting around thinking, oh my God, I'm so bad at music. I'm the worst and ugliest person alive and no one likes me and da 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 da. I think still there's some sort of North Star beneath it all that keeps me frankly alive, you know? And I think every morning, even if I wake up with like tons of depression or which is something that I deal with, like the thing that just keeps me inching forward, even if it's like a like tiny little incremental moving forward with my day. It's music.
Lovely. Uh, in fact, when I was going through your bio that was shared to me by your team, uh, what I read, they had quoted a lot about your music in terms of how deeply personal it is to you and how emotive it has been. Uh, from or having listening to songs like "Own Me," "Pity Season," "Swan Song," and a lot of your work, I'm eager to know from you, in terms of being an artist, does it also mean that you've got to be an anguished soul, or does one need to experience a lot of sufferings of humanity in more intensive ways than what a normal person would, ideally? What is your take on that?
I think being a person is a lot of suffering,
Hmm.
and it's also a lot of catharsis and joy. I think an artist's special sort of role is putting those things into a form that feels tangible um, and connective. I don't necessarily. I mean, I will say like every artist I've met has a little bit of a melancholy in them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think every person I've met, if you really ask them their full story, everyone has, you know, a generational story, a personal story, mental health, adversities, and the way that they feel like they don't fit in. Like we're all kind of a little bit more on the same page than we realize. It's just that artists maybe need a place to put it more than, or have found a place to put it. I think everybody kind of needs a place to put their suffering, whether it's through their work or through their relationship, or yeah, like it could show up in any form. And it's just that some of us make paintings or songs and that helps us like process it. But I actually think we're all kind of on the same page in terms of what our sufferings are and what our desires are, which is just to be understood and loved and connected, you know.
But do you think it's necessary for someone to go through that drill to probably express that better in terms of their music?
That's a really interesting question, because you do find cases artistically where a 17-year-old writes like Adele's early material, like writing songs that you would think she's been through a lifetime of divorces and all this stuff, and and she's like not even been in a relationship yet or something, and she hasn't even fallen in love yet, and she writes this song. So I think sometimes it comes from some other source that doesn't even have to do with like what you've been through. um but to give like a concrete answer to your question, um yeah, I think there, I don't know what my answer is, to be honest with you. But I will say that almost every single artist I've met, there's some sort of emotional angst or anguish, and then they work through that with time. And um, it's amazing to see the transformation. Like I don't think any artist wants to feel really bad, to make better art. Um, but I do think that sometimes those deep emotions do bring something out of you that just wouldn't be accessible if it was smooth sailing all the time.
I have another follow up question based on what you just said right now. How can one reconcile the parts of oneself that they can't connect with, and how can an artist release themselves from the self doubt that we spoke of earlier in terms of their artistic expression?
Wow. I'm still figuring that one out. But I think uh, I love that phrase from Dory from Finding Nemo. She says, "Just keep swimming." I love that, because that's basically all you need. Is like, okay, maybe we will never be fully free of self-doubt, because our brains are wired to protect us from danger and from threats. And so they feed us these messages that are totally ancient about what position we are in a room, uh, and I think if we just accept that that's the way that our brains unfortunately kind of work, but just keep like hacking away at the thing, then you're kind of on the right path. I don't think it's about getting rid of it forever, because life isn't linear like that. You don't just get less self-conscious over time. You know what I mean? But you do learn more about yourself over time, and hopefully come to some sort of deeper acceptance. And as soon as you can accept the chaos and the ups and downs of it, then maybe the closer you are to sort of maximizing your potential creatively.
Got it. I'm gonna speak about the present because that means for a lot more relevance in terms of what you're doing. Uh, so, in terms of performance, if we were to consider the performance side of things, most of the music and the settings that you play are acoustically oriented, right? Which can be pretty hard to amplify and can be hard to make sound good in a very large space or in a very large environment, especially if you were to consider amphitheaters or arenas. So, where are you right now with something like that in terms of the entire experience you're trying to give to people wherever you're playing?
Well, some of my favorite concerts that I ever saw growing up were in theaters around like 1,500 people or something like that. And you could hear a pin drop in the crowd. That's how dedicated and moved everyone was by either the solo performer or like the very sparse music. And that's just always been the stuff that I was drawn to. So with this project, I really wanted to make stuff that I listen to, that I love listening to. In terms of it translating live, I can answer that question after next week, because next week my tour starts, and it'll be my first time performing that music in front of a crowd that's there for me. I will say that it's really tough to open a show for another artist with that music, because everybody talks over it and everybody's drinking and it's but like this, I think everyone's going to know the words and everyone's going to have listened to the music, and there for me. So I'll get back to you on that. But in terms of like arenas and stuff, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever play a room that size, but I could see like someday playing Royal Albert Hall or something of that size, and that feels incredible to me because it's still a seated theater, and when it's quiet, it's just magical.
So what are the places that you'll be playing at? Which continent? And is Asia going to be one of that? And is India going to be one of that? Most important of all.
No, unfortunately, there's no Asia tour on this time around. I hope soon, but this is just going to be Europe, UK, and US.
Got it. And how long is the duration of the entire thing?
Well, it's actually not that many shows. It's 6 shows total, and it's just in the main sort of. So there's London, Amsterdam, Berlin, Paris, and then New York and Los Angeles. And it'll last. I mean, I have a long break in between the UK, EU, and the US tour. So basically, I'll be on tour until the end of October.
Good luck with that.
Thank you so much.
Will we get to hear any live content recorded as a DVD for sale of this entire experience?
That's an interesting idea. I think we do definitely want to record some of it. I'll mention it to my manager, because that is a really good idea.
So we're in a very modern era right now. There's stiff competition in every possible field, for that matter. And someone like you, having signed with one of the biggest labels in the world, how do you relate to the competitiveness in the music industry, and how prevalent is competition in terms of the career that you've put forth for yourself?
I don't really think about competition ever at all, really. I mean, there is a certain sense of Sorry, it's so loud in here. There is a sense of comparativeness when you see your friends doing something that you really want to do. You get comparative, But I actually think that it's so much a community of like bolstering each other up, and like the people that it's everything. If you make friends with other artists and you're all doing the same sort of tour circuits and putting out music, not together, but at the same time, it's actually really a sense of comfort and of community. So I don't really feel competitive at all.
Okay. Is there a guiding light or a principle that you majorly focus on in terms of your artistry at this point?
Is what a guiding light? Sorry.
So do you have certain set of principles, in terms of your artistry right now?
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think they probably overlap a lot with my principles as a human, kindness, empathy, inclusion, curiosity, open-heartedness, really just being like open to whatever comes and trying to learn and grow from other people.
That kind of gets me thinking. Does one need to be a good human being to be a good musician?
No. I think I know a couple of amazing musicians that are not the best people. But I do think that karma comes back around, and I think the more good energy you put out, the more it comes back to you. Even if you're someone could reach great heights of success, but if they're not a good person, they're going to be very lonely once they're up there.
For sure. Speaking of your singing style, it's very unorthodox from what we see. Your voice has a very unique and a distinct sound when we hear it. When you were little, you were singing, and you practiced a lot in terms of your tonality, the timbre in your voice, etc. And also, it seems to me that the phrasing is a very key factor in terms of your music. So, could you throw some light on that?
I don't know if I put that much conscious thought into the phrasing, more so than just like saying what I need to say, and it comes out in one of those ways that you can't really explain it.
Mhm.
But in terms of the vocal timbre and stuff, that's stuff that I've really been experimenting with. Actually, the way that it started was when COVID hit, I moved back in with my parents, and they could hear me singing through the wall. And so I started singing a lot quieter because I was embarrassed. I hadn't lived at home for like quite a few years, and I just didn't want them to hear me. So then I started recording with this quieter timbre and like having the microphone just right up here. And that felt really interesting to me, actually. It was like an unwarranted or unexpected discovery. And ever since then, my voice has changed. But I'm opening back up now, and I'm trying to like be more open to belty stuff as well, because it is fun to sing. But I just used to be so much more, the Christina Aguilera phase where everyone was trying to sing like that and sing runs and whatever. And then that got so uninteresting to everybody. And then the Billie Eilish thing, Phoebe Bridgers thing came around. And I think I kind of hopped on that train a little bit. And now I'm sort of discovering through that, what it is that my own.
Got it. So, how do you respond to the changing scenario in terms of the globalization of culture that we're going through at this point? There is this changing nature in terms of the structure, the form, and the approaches to music. Music just keeps evolving, like you said, right? So, there have been several phases. People have had different, tastes in music, and do you in some ways despair its increasing commercialization that we get to hear today? It's perhaps diminishing its entire integrity in a very traditional sense, if I could put it that way. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely relate to that sort of overwhelming feeling, or the feeling of despair that people's attention for quality has just decreased to the point where they'd rather take, 10-second hooks on TikTok or whatever. I think it's like wherever you put your focus, that thing is going to magnify in your mind. And if I were to sit around thinking, oh my God, the industry is doomed, the music is doomed because of TikTok, it just doesn't help me in any way. And I think there are enough artists and enough genres that prove that the world is very big, and there are lots of people in the world who do have patience for music that is longer and slower and requires more attention to detail and things like that. It's just like it's the same way it's always been. I think the more shallow, easier to swallow, more bubblegum type of stuff that's like really popular and trendy and is gonna do well. But there's also in the meantime subcultures of all this really exciting music and art and things that maybe aren't in the press but are still sort of bubbling under and changing the fabric of the culture in ways that we might not even realize until 30 years from now, you know.
So where do you see music heading 30 years from now? What's if you were to indulge in a little bit of futurology? What might be the direction of the entire music space?
Well, if we are still here in 30 years, I that is such an interesting question. I have a feeling that there's going to be some sort of like anti-technology revolution that's like very off social media and off just like swinging the other way because we're basically cyborgs now. And I think that at some point there's going to be some big uproar about how sick of that everyone is, and probably will come back to our much more local lives,
Hmm.
and considering maybe like the environment that we're going to be living in by then. I think a lot of people are going to be growing their own food and like looking after. This is a positive version. Growing their own food, not flying very much, not traveling very much, and probably more focused on the community. Which reminds me a lot of my grandparents' town as is. Like every Sunday, everybody goes to church and plays music all day. And none of them are on the internet. They're all really old, so they don't understand it. And they're just they just run into each other on the street. It's like very real life. And I just wonder if that might be the direction that eventually all young people are going to want to head in because they're just so sick of how synthetic everything is.
Interesting. Quite an interesting take. I'm interested to know what is your practice regime? Like, do you have a practice regime at all right now?
I'm terrible and have always been terrible at practicing music. Even as a kid, I didn't do my scales like I was supposed to, and I definitely am not a role model in that respect. Um, I more so only rehearse when I have other bandmates to play with, and then like for this tour, obviously we had to do tour rehearsals, but it's like kind of against my will. Um, and but in terms of like vocal warm ups and stuff, I did always because I started less. That's another thing that I'm really bad at it because I started lessons so early, and I think I just have an aversion to like clinical ways of going about music. Um, but I'm just like undisciplined in general, I guess. What's the answer to your question? I do have vocal warm ups and cool downs because that was just hammered into me from the very beginning. So I do those before and after every show.
But I feel you're a naturally gifted singer, and music runs in the blood.
Thanks.
Do you find that music in some ways helps you cultivate a sense of surrender, that of detachment? Because in a lot of ways, during a performance, it is essentially a sense of control, decontrol, and yet be in control.
Can you repeat the first part of that question?
Yeah. So do you feel that you can help cultivate a sense of surrender in terms of music? I mean, you kind of need to sort of detach yourself and then be in
Yeah,
control
yeah,
at certain
absolutely.
times. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the coolest things about performing for me is just like it is the total surrender while I'm singing a song and
Hmm.
seeing where it takes me and being open to surprises. And sometimes my voice does things I didn't even know it could do and things like that. And
Right.
then holding the whole crowd in the palm of your hand during the banter between songs, that's my favorite part, almost even more than the songs. I love talking to the crowd. I love telling jokes and
Mhm.
stories. Uh, yeah, I absolutely love it, especially when they listen.
Got it. I have another question. When I listen to your music, I feel definitely the auditory sensitivity aspect of it is top notch, right? When it comes to your music. So, in terms of this process, do you visualize emotions or possibly certain landscapes or certain events at the top of your head when you're writing or playing this music?
Um, uh, yes, I definitely do have visions
Hmm.
that sort of connect the storytelling of what I'm writing. Like
Okay.
usually I see the music video of my dreams in my head, even though I never really get to make it because it's too
Uh-huh.
expensive. But
Okay.
uh, I also get like color palettes and that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
Things that tie in that world builds a little bit. I love world building.
Got it. But in terms of your latest EP, what was that? Uh, you know what was that process for you in terms of drafting out like different levels of the same? In terms of your songwriting, in terms of defining uh, what is what, right? In terms of the music.
Well, at first it all came just with writing the songs separately because I was experiencing anticipating losing someone I love
Uh huh.
who was really ill. And so I was sort of just I kept writing about that and then I realized, oh wow, all of these fit together sort of like a story of someone finding that out and then having to share it with their kid and then the kid being like, what is going on? And then
Hmm.
having to fulfill their legacy and fill their shoes without them there
Recording in
anymore.
progress.
Hmm.
And so when I realized that all of these songs fell in an order that really made sense as a story, then I
Hmm.
just started sort of building out the color palette, which I wanted to have be a lot of faded grays and blues and
Hmm.
soft things, and then the ideas with the videos, and then as well
Yeah.
um, the symbolism of like the duvet on the cover and like I just think and the duvet and the Own Me visualizer, some of the water, like the water for Swan Song and the sort of
Yeah.
wet look, and all the press pictures have like both the wet look with the duvet and things like that. I just think that all sort of symbolize rebirth and also death and um, uh, a bit of that depressive sort of avoidance of just wanting to kind of wrap yourself in a blanket and not look at anything in the face. And that's what the music is too. Like it feels like a blanket wrapping around you, I think. And that was part of the sentiment with like having those ambient sounds and things. So that was all very tied in with each other.
Sounds pretty intense. It must have been a lot going on. Must have been really overwhelming at a certain point in terms of all of this going on at the same time.
Yeah, definitely super overwhelming. But that's what the music is for.
We have a lot of fans who've tuned in on Instagram from India and other parts of the world. They'd like to know some interesting anecdotes in terms of your touring experience so far. Maybe the top two highlights, or some stories that you could share to them about your experience.
Wow. Top two stories from touring. Well, one of them was I just right when I was starting out.
Mhm.
It's not so much a touring anecdote as it is just a great anecdote. When I was starting out and I posted videos online, one of them was "Isn't She Lovely" by Stevie Wonder, and his daughter caught wind of it and ended up inviting me to a performance of his, and we met
Oh, lovely.
backstage. And I was introduced to Stevie, and obviously he's blind, and obviously I have one arm, and and I don't think he was like given the context on who I was or anything. So he sort of put his hand out to shake my hand, and I just put my arm in his hand. And he did not know what was going on. He's like, "What on earth is this?" And I was like, "Hey, I'm Victoria, and I covered your song." And he was like, "Oh my gosh, I heard your song. I heard the cover. It was so beautiful. Keep going, sweetie. Just believe in yourself. Keep going." So that was like one of my favorite experiences. And then another one
Was this
was
Aisha? What
singing.
was this? Was this Aisha?
Yeah.
Okay.
and then and then the other story that I can think of is a couple years ago, I sang backgrounds at the Oscars.
Hmm.
And first of all, it was just amazing to do. But also at the end of the gig, like after the award show,
Yeah.
we had been dressed in like all this fancy wardrobe for the performance. And
Uh-huh.
then you got to give it back and get back in your sweatpants and whatever. And so I was wearing a full-on sweatsuit, and I left through what I thought was the exit where I was supposed to go, but it turns out it was the red carpet part. And so I ended up sneaking down, or like kind of conspicuously hopping down the red carpet bit where all of the celebrities were, and all of the like paparazzi people sort of put their camera down as I was walking by. They're like, "Who is this?" And then I reached the end bit where all of the celebrities were talking to each other, and I was just they were all fully in makeup and glam and so wonderfully dressed, and I was in my sweatsuit pajamas, and I was just standing there with a drink, kind of waiting for my car, and it was like Penelope Cruz and Mark Ruffalo and Natalie Portman and Josh Gad and like all of these people sort of talking over me, and I felt like the most invisible person alive. It was like I was some sort of mole or cockroach. And I hated it, but it was really cool to see that many celebrities in the same place. So that's that's my second anecdote.
You were a Fulbright scholar at the Berklee College of Music, and you later studied jazz at Barcelona for a short stint. You've had very firm grounding in terms of your musical foundation. What are some of the qualities of a good teacher that you now aspire for yourself?
That's a great question. I think what a mentor or teacher can do best is really just encourage the student to be the most themselves they can be, and to just keep trying things, and just to put yourself out there even before you're ready to, even before you think you're ready to, because when are you really ready, and
Yeah.
I honestly think that's one of the biggest gifts that my mentors have given me, is just to say, hey, keep doing you and do it loud, and time will do its thing, but just
Yeah.
stick to it and just be yourself. Yeah.
You have been an activist, in terms of a lot of interesting causes for specially abled. You want to sort of promote their artistic abilities, and you also support the LGBTQ community. So, what are some of the essential uh, factors or some of the essential traits that one could possibly do to support this entire movement at this point?
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I support those two groups because I am those two groups. I'm
Yeah,
queer and I'm disabled,
yeah,
and I think one of the most important things that someone can do is just read about the terminology that's respectful to use, and
yeah,
the practices that we can use in our everyday life to be more inclusive and patient with one another. Um, I move through the world with my difference, and people treat me differently because of it. And I've seen other people, friends who use wheelchairs or have some other physical impediment or anything like that need extra assistance. And and I see the patience that they particularly need to move through the world, because people look at them like they're less, or they're not quick to assist, or they're very quick to judge and pity. And I think there's just like a huge amount that needs to evolve in terms of our overall philosophy surrounding disability and adaptive assistance in our everyday life. Um, and also with queerness, it's just like with anything, I feel like it's kind of like my main passion is anti-bullying. I just think, I think like mean humor and being degrading and making others feel small to make yourself feel funny, even just for a moment, is so harmful and so traumatizing. And I've been through my fair share of that abuse. So I feel really passionate about changing the fabric of how kids treat each other, but it spreads into adults as well. Bullying is very much an adult thing as well.
I'm going to move towards the most interesting segment of our interview, which is the rapid fire segment. And you got to be spontaneous with your answers. You don't have that much time to think, and it's going to be a fun segment, right? So, my first question for you, Victoria, what is that one song that always makes you cry?
Fix You, Coldplay.
Lovely. On the contrary, what is your favorite guilty pleasure song?
Tempo by Lizzo.
If someone were to come to you from outer space, from a planet like Mars, how would you possibly describe your music to them?
I describe it as "Are you okay?" music.
Great, you're doing great so far. Your version of 5 must-haves when you are doing a tour, or any performance for that matter, for any musician.
Gummy bears, AirPods, fluffy sweater, socks, and oh geez, I can't come up with a fifth one. Oh, a toothbrush.
These are like the basics. I mean, you got them spot on. If you had to put together an all-star modern pop band, who'd be in it?
Phoebe Bridgers, Billie Eilish, Holly Humberstone, Chris Martin, and Maddie Healy.
Wouldn't you be part of it?
Oh no.
What would be your favorite cuisine to start with?
Japanese.
Have you tried Indian cuisine?
Yeah, Indian is my second choice.
So I have one last question for you, which is a custom in all my interviews. Down in the distant horizon, what would you want to be remembered as, Victoria?
A kind, cuddly, deep person.
Lovely, lovely. As we continue to celebrate a dozen marvelous musical pieces that you have for us in the next couple of years, and of course, you've displayed incredible showmanship in all your performances, and you've had impeccable vocal abilities and lovely songwriting skills, which sort of projects a very rich and intense life that all of us in India and other parts of the world sort of await to watch. Thank you so much for giving me this privilege. And this interview will be additionally aired on Big FM Shillong and Aizol, 2 major radio stations in India, on the Sunday show between 5 to 6 p.m. And it is also going to be part of my podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stalwarts of Music with Aditya Veera. I'll be sure to share these links with you once they're out. You can also share it with your fans. And I hope to stay in touch with you. And I'd love to have you in India very soon.
I would love that too. Thank you so much for having me. This was a really, really fun interview.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the privilege. Take care and have a nice time shopping. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.